Two travelers of differing humors. There were two men of very different humors together upon a journey. One went despondingly on, with 1,000 cares and troubles in his head, exclaiming every now and then, "Whatever shall I do to live?" The other jogged merrily along, determined to keep a good heart, to do his best, and to leave the issue to fortune. "How can you be so merry?" said the sorrowful plotter. "As I am a sinner, my heart is ready to break, for fear I should want bread." "Tut, man," said the other, "there's enough bread to spare for all of us." Presently the grumbler had another heavy thought that made him groan aloud. "What a dreadful thing it would be if I were struck blind!" said he, and he must needs walk on ahead with his eyes shut to try to see how it would seem if that misfortune should befall him. His fellow traveler, coming after him, picked up a purse of gold, which the other, having his eyes shut, had not perceived, and thus was he punished for his mistrust, for the purse had been his, if he had not first willingly put it out of his power to see it. Lesson: Fortune helps those who help themselves. The Cock and the Fox. One bright spring morning, a cock perched among the branches of a lofty tree, crowed loud and long. The shrillness of his voice echoed through the wood, and the well-known note brought a fox, who was prowling in quest of prey, to the spot. The fox, seeing that the cock was at a great height, set his wits to work to find some way of bringing him down. He saluted the bird in his mildest voice and said, "Have you not heard, cousin, of the proclamation of peace and harmony among all kinds of beasts and birds? We are no longer to prey upon and devour one another, but love and friendship are to be the order of the day. Do come down, and we will talk over this great news at our leisure." The cock, who knew that the fox was only at his old tricks, pretended to be watching something in the distance. Finally, the fox asked him what it was he looked at so earnestly. "Why," said the cock, "I think I see a pack of hounds yonder." "Oh, then," said the fox, "your humble servant I must be gone." "Nay, cousin," said the cock, "pray do not go. I am just coming down. You are surely not afraid of dogs in these peaceable times." No, no," said the fox, "but 10 to 1 they have not heard of the proclamation yet." Lesson: 'Tis a poor rule that will not work both ways. The Cobbler turned Doctor. A very unskillful cobbler, finding himself unable to make a living at his trade, gave up mending books and took to doctoring instead. He gave out that he had the secret of a universal antidote against all poisons, and acquired no small reputation thanks to his talent for puffing himself. One day, however, he fell very ill, and the king of the country bethought him that he would test the value of his remedy. Calling therefore for a cup, he poured out a dose of the antidote, and under pretense of mixing poison with it, added a little water and commanded him to drink it. Terrified by the fear of being poisoned, the cobbler confessed that he knew nothing about medicine, and that his antidote was worthless. Then the king summoned his subjects and addressed them as follows: "What folly could be greater than yours? Here is the cobbler to whom no one will send his boots to be mended, and yet you have not hesitated to entrust him with your lives." Lesson: It is not wise to trust someone who claims he can do what no one else can. The Boy and the Filberts. A boy once thrust his hand into a pitcher that was full of figs and filberts. He grasped as many as his fist could possibly hold, but when he tried to draw it out, the narrowness of the neck prevented him. Not liking to lose any of them, but unable to draw out his hand full, he burst into tears and bitterly bemoaned his hard fortune. An honest fellow who stood by gave him this wise and reasonable advice: "Grasp only half the quantity, my boy, and you will easily succeed." Lesson: Do not seize more than you can carry away. The Knight and the Charger. A certain soldier in time of war took great pains to keep his horse well fed and cared for, and in first-rate condition. When the war was over, the soldier's pay was reduced, and he allowed his horse that had carried him nobly through many a hot engagement to be used for dragging huge logs of timber, and for hire in many other rough and disagreeable ways. Being thus hardly fed and badly treated, the animal's strength and spirit fell away. It was not long before the war was renewed, and the soldier, taking his horse again, tried by good feeding and better treatment to make him into a battle steed once more. There was not time for this, however, and the horse, as his weak legs gave under way of him in charge, said to his master, "It is too late now to repair your neglect. You have degraded me from a horse into an ass. It is not my fault that I cannot at once turn back from an ass to a horse." Lesson: it is easier to go from good to bad than from bad to good. The Crow and the Raven. A crow was very jealous of the raven because he was considered a bird of good omen and always attracted the attention of men, as indicated by his flight, the good or evil course of future events. Seeing some travelers approaching, she flew up into a tree and, perching herself on one of the branches, cawed as loudly as she could. The travelers turned towards the sound and wondered what it boded, when one of them said to his companion, "Let us proceed on our journey, my friend, for it is only the caw of a crow, and her cry, you know, is no omen." Lesson: those who assume a character that does not belong to them only make themselves ridiculous. The Man and the Trees. One day, a man went into a forest and asked the trees if they would be so good as to give him a handle for his axe. The trees readily granted his request and gave him a piece of tough ash. But no sooner had the man fitted it into his axe head than he quickly began to use it and laid about him so vigorously that the giants of the forest fell under his strokes. "Alas," said a doomed oak to a cedar, "the first step lost us all. If we had not given up our rights to the ash, we might have stood for ages." Lesson: let not your conduct furnish a handle against yourself. The Sick Stag. A stag whose joints had become stiff with old age was at great pains to get together a large heap of fodder, enough, as he thought, to last him for the remainder of his days. He stretched himself out upon it, and, now dozing, now nibbling, made up his mind to wait quietly for the end. He had always been of a gay and lively turn, and had made in his time many friends. These now came in great numbers to see him and wish him farewell. While engaged in friendly talk over past adventures and old times, what more natural than that they should help themselves to a little of the food which seemed so plentifully stored around? The end of the matter was that the poor stag died not so much of sickness or of old age as for sheer want of the food which his friends had eaten for him. Lesson: thoughtless friends bring more hurt than profit. The Swallow and the Crow. A swallow was once boasting to a crow about her birth. "I was once a princess," said she, "the daughter of a king of Athens, but my husband used me cruelly and cut out my tongue for a slight fault. Then, to protect me from further injury, I was turned by Juno into a bird." "You chatter quite enough as it is," said the crow. "What you would have been like if you hadn't lost your tongue, I can't think." Lesson: the vain are always ready to shower themselves with praises. The Emigrant Mice. A mouse, weary of living in the continual alarm attendant on the carnage committed among her nation by cats and traps, thus addressed herself to the tenant of a hole near her own. "An excellent thought has just come into my head. I read in some book which I gnawed a few days ago that there is a fine country called the Indies, in which mice are in much greater security than here. In that region, the sages believe that the soul of a mouse has been that of a king, a great captain, or some wonderful saint, and that after death it will probably enter the body of a beautiful woman or mighty potentate. If I recall rightly, this is called metempsychosis. Under this idea, they treat all animals with paternal charity, and build and endow hospitals for mice, where they are fed like people of consequence. Come then, my good sister, let us hasten to a country, the customs of which are so excellent, where the justice is done to our merits." "But, sister," replied her neighbor, "do not cats enter these hospitals? If they do, metempsychosis must take place very soon, and in great numbers, and a talon or a tooth might make a fakir or a king, a miracle we can do very well without." "Do not fear," said the first mouse. "In these countries order is completely established. The cats have their houses as well as we ours, and they have their hospitals for the sick separate from ours. After this conversation, 2 mice set out together, contriving the evening before they set sail to creep along the cordage of a vessel that was to make a long voyage. They got under way and were enraptured with the sight of the sea that took them from the abominable shores on which cats exercise their tyranny. The voyage was pleasant, and they reached Surat not like merchants to acquire riches, but to receive good treatment from the Hindus. They had scarcely entered one of the houses fitted up for mice when they aspired to the best accommodation. One of them pretended to recollect having formerly been a Brahmin on the coast of Malabar, and the other protested that she had been a fine lady in the same country with long ears, but they displayed so much impertinence that the Indian mice lost all patience. A civil war commenced, and no quarter was given to the 2 newcomers who pretended to impose laws on the others, when instead of being eaten up by cats, they were strangled by their own brethren. Lesson: it is useless to go far in search of safety if we are not modest and wise.